Hi, everybody.
Hello.
It's been a few weeks, so welcome back to Professors Providing Professional Development. What happened was Karin and I had the audacity to take a vacation. Shame on us.
We had a couple of weeks between semesters.
Yeah. We did post some stuff anyhow, so we were thinking in advance, but we were not thinking about doing this while we were taking some time off. And by taking time off, I mean preparing for the summer classes.
Right. They started today.
We're happy to be back. And today we want to talk about nonfiction. I heard Dr. Bob Small, who many of you won't know, but you should, because he's like the godfather of nonfiction. I heard him years ago at a conference say, nonfiction is the only book that we define by what it is not. I don't know what it is, but it's not fiction. And honest to Pete, that has stuck with me all these years because nonfiction subsumes such a wide array of books, right, Karin?
Yes. Yes. And different styles, different formats, different genres. Nonfiction is just such a huge, it's like half your library, or over half your library is what nonfiction actually fits in.
And if you saw the video we did on genres and subgenres in books, what you saw was basically Karin saying we've got fiction, we've got nonfiction, then everything else kind of falls under that. And the things that don't fall under that are form and format, poetry, things like that. So we figured we'd talk about nonfiction. It's going to be fun. And I want to start with what I think is still the best ever resource. This is nonfiction for young adults, From Delight to Wisdom. It's from Oryx Press, O-R-Y-X. And the authors are Dick Abrahamson and Betty Carter. You may not know those names, and if you don't, I want to say, why not? Betty Carter did her dissertation on nonfiction, and it really has presented a lot about nonfiction over the years. And Dick was her advisor. He was also my advisor. He was also Kylene Beer's advisor. He's someone that we all know and love and respect. And this became my Bible for nonfiction, especially nonfiction for young adults, because when we move up to that level of nonfiction, we really do have to consider some other things. Today, we're going to talk about some of the criteria that Dick and Betty include in here, and not all of them, because that would be a book, and you have other things to do besides just watching us, as charming as we are. But we're going to try to talk you through some of these criteria and give you some examples along the way.
Now, most likely that book is out of print.
Yep.
However, you will still probably be able to find it on Amazon.
You can.
On other sellers. So definitely go and check that out. Just because it's an older book and out of print doesn't mean it's still, that it doesn't have good information, because it still does. So I will go and get my copy myself.
And check alibris.com, which is an out-of-print resource.
True.
And also check in those of you who are in schools, go check with your school librarian. If you're in a middle school or a high school, this should be a teacher resource. And if it's not, order it.
That's right.
Ask your librarian to order it for you. It's always good to have resources like this. I refer to it after 26 years of teaching literature. I still have to refer to things like this. So let's get started with the first criteria. What are the qualifications of the author?
All right, so of course we don't know these authors personally most of the time. So we can't sit there and check their resumes and see what it is that they know necessarily. Now, you can probably go to their websites and see what kind of backgrounds they have, because sometimes these authors do have backgrounds in the types of books that they're writing. However, over time, you see that some authors do get a reputation for being like the go-to people for nonfiction. So do you want to start jumping into a few of those?
We'll talk about that in just a minute.
Okay.
Before that, though, I want to point out that, you can open the back of the book.
Of course.
And find out about the author and his or her qualifications. But you do run into the kind of authors that we're going to talk about now that write about a wide array of topics. Think of Steve Jenkins, who's written about
Atomic Bomb.
And Benedict Arnold.
Yes.
And Daniel Ellsberg in the Pentagon Papers, to name just a few. And Susan Campbell Bartoletti, who's written about the Irish potato famine.
The KKK.
And Bloody Mary, or Typhoid Mary,
Yes.
not Bloody Mary, sorry. Two different things. You can tell it's the end of the day. I'm thinking Bloody Mary, what can I say? So you have people that you already know who write about a wide range, and they can't possibly be experts in all of them.
So something to refer to then, to double check and see what they do. So there, of course, I would also go and see, like I said before, check their website out. Because a lot of them talk about their research, they talk about their project, but then also it's nice in some of these books that they include their author's notes. And that's where you get to really see a lot of times how much work they put into their research, which they take these things serious. Now, fiction authors do as well. Fiction authors go and will research subjects and topics. They do that as well. But for nonfiction, we're looking for accuracy of information. And so that research is so important.
So we pooled, I think, a half dozen authors that we know do their research. This is not to say they're the only ones. They're not. But these are people that we know year after year produce incredible pieces of nonfiction for kids. One of them is Kathleen Krull. You may be more familiar with some of her earlier works. She did those wonderful The Lives of scientists, athletes, presidents that had wonderful caricature kind of things in them. This is her newest one, A Guide to America's Bill of Rights. I can't think of a more timely book than this one as we talk in our political discourse about Second Amendment and Fifth Amendment and things like that. It is a kid's version of the Book of Rights, and it's a pretty dense text. It's got lots of information in it. It is broken up by illustration, and you've got some white space in some of them too. This would probably be a wonderful resource for your history teachers, especially as they're going to talk about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But Krull herself, and I saw that you went and pulled another one of Krull books.
We're not going to talk about biography necessarily in this, so we set this one aside. But she's also recently doing these as well, another little series, Women Who Broke the Rules. And so this is Mary Todd Lincoln, and so you can see that this is something else that's new, fairly new, that she's doing.
And included in that series is Coretta Scott King, Judy Blume, Sacagawea, Dolly Madison, and Sonia Sotomayor. So you've got a really nice diversity in there as well. One of the other authors in the young adult field that I always consider go-to is James Cross Giblin. Jim was also an editor of other people's works. He knew the writing from the inside and the outside. And this is his Life and Death of Adolf Hitler. But he also wrote books on the history of chairs, on silverware, on all kinds of other wild topics. What Giblin does beautifully is write that narrative nonfiction, that kind of story that pulls you in. It's a real story, but you still just get kind of sucked in because he uses all of the wonderful tools that a fiction writer would do as well. And of course, look at the great cover for this one too.
And as you can see at the top of this, he was a winner of the Cyber Medal.
Yep. So. And there's another good reason.
Right. Okay, so Steve Jenkins. Yes, so whenever I hear that, I hear Steve Schenken. So not the same person. So Eye to Eye. Now he has won a Caldecott honor, so for artwork, of course, but still, this is a good. Those illustrations do add to the text of this, all of this little informational, almost like tidbits on each page. So as far as he goes, as as an author, I like the way that he lays out his books. They're pleasing to the eye, as well as incorporating the small bits of information throughout.
And many of his books are about animals.
Yeah.
So if you like Eye to Eye, then just keep on reading Steve Schenken. Now, see, you've got me doing
Jenkins.
it. Steve Jenkins. I'm sorry, Steve, if you're seeing this. Keep watching for other books that he's done, because it's just a great series of books about animals.
Did he do the other one, the one about size?
Yes.
Yes. So.
And Hands and Tails and things like that as well. Kids love these books. These are great browsing books, but they're also good books to share in your science classes.
Okay. Don Brown. Now, where do we know Don Brown from?
Drowned City and other
Dust
graphic
Bowl.
novels.
That's right.
Yeah,
So, more recently, I think I've seen those from him, graphic novels from him. But here is a Aaron and Hamilton and Burr. That situation here. Wonderful illustrations as well. But there again, nonfiction. So like this is a nonfiction picture book. So also that narrative quality, which he also is known for in those graphic novels.
And we all know how popular Hamilton is right now.
That's so true.
Another person that I love in the science field is Loree Griffith Burns. This is Beetle Busters, but she has other books as well, including a few in the in the Scientists in the Field series, which I really like. Lawrence Pringle writes in that. There's several nonfiction authors. This is wonderful. I love the subtitle. It's The Rogue Insect and the People Who Track It. There are people who, and you can see them on the back there with the binoculars, track beetles to see basically about the health of the environment, that beetles do an awful lot. There's also a wonderful book on the dung beetle, a narrower scope, something we're going to talk about in a few minutes. She's also done books about butterflies, about how to be a scientific observer in your own backyard. So great science books for kids from Loree Griffith Burns.
And then we have the wonderful, well-known Seymour Simon. He's got a great website as well, so definitely check out his website. But I tell you what, if you want a book on any topic, man, he's written so many different things in science with his nonfiction. And so this is the solar system. And of course, oh good grief, see, look on the back. Look at all of his books. And that's just some of them. But Seymour Simon is one of those authors, like we've just, he's concluding our section on this topic as far as qualifications of the author. Seymour Simon is definitely one of your go-to authors for nonfiction.
Absolutely. Now, the second criteria says, are the facts accurate? Well, you know, I don't know. Neither does Karin most of the time when we're reading books. I think the closest I've come have been a couple books about, like the Daniel Ellsberg one. I kind of lived during that time. I knew an awful lot about the Pentagon Papers, but I still didn't do the research. And there's a lot of areas where I'm just clueless.
We have to rely on our authors.
And if we don't rely on ourselves, sometimes we'll rely on reviews. And the problem with reviews is most of the people writing reviews are no more experts in a field, the solar system, beetles, whatever, than we are. And so you run into that problem. And one of the things that I've always encouraged teachers to do is to take a book about a topic where you've got more than one book on the subject. The infamous sharks. I think it's a mandatory unit in some schools. But there are dozens of books about sharks. I know Gail Gibbons has one, just to start with. But here's a new one. This one's called The Great White Shark Scientist. This is part of that Scientist in the Field series.
And it's Cy Montgomery.
So
he kind of overflow with the qualification
one. Those are two good reasons, to trust this. But what I would do is put kids into groups, give each group 2, maybe 3 books on sharks, have them create a chart. Here are, in this first column, all the facts where the 2 or 3 books agree. Then a second column, here are the points on which there is some disagreement. And then in the third column, it's up to the kids to go out, do the research, and discover which is right. And from there, they'd be able to make an estimation. Which of these 2 or 3 books does the best job or does a better job at talking about sharks? You don't need to be the expert. You can, however, also look at resources. There are 2 wonderful sets of lists that are put out each year from the Children's Book Council. One is Outstanding Science Trade Books, and the other is Notable Trade Books in the Social Studies. Those are put together by the National Science Teachers Association and the National Council for Social Studies. They also have one now on math as well by National Council Teachers of Math. Those have been vetted. If you're a science teacher, I expect that you're able to make some comment about whether or not this book is really accurate or not.
Now, just because on that chart that the kids make, just because the fact is only found in one book, now that doesn't mean it's wrong. That just means maybe that book was a little bit more in depth. So there again, in that last column, when they're doing their research, that's where they're going to decide if, yes, that author had it right. They didn't just throw that one in. They were just more in depth. Possibly.
Because remember, everything we're learning about sharks, that they may hold part of a clue to the cure for cancer, that there are other things that sharks are able to do, or that have diseases that don't affect them that might translate into medical science. These are things we're discovering.
Right, so new.
So there's always going to be new discoveries. I'm glad that you pointed that out. So are the facts accurate? That's not something we need to do. And I feel much better knowing that.
And it's something the kids need to know too. They need to know that they aren't the expert in everything.
Right.
Neither are the authors. They need to find out how to find out the right information. That's the point of us teaching them how to efficiently and effectively do their own research.
And if you do have a kid who's an expert, because we all get experts from time to time, let them tell you which book you ought to be investing your $17.99 in to add to your collection. But we want to make sure that as we're adding books to the collection, we get the ones that are most accurate. While it's fun to show kids books that sometimes have inaccurate information, really it's counterproductive, because then you're planting in some kid's head something that's not right.
So,
and it's hard to get rid of after a while.
A lot of times, reviews, they're not as widespread. Nonfiction reviews are not as easy to find. So that's why it is important also to rely on those lists that you mentioned that were vetted by those different organizations, those content area professionals, and also knowing the quality series, like The Scientist in the Field, and the quality authors, because you know when you see that book on your book order, you know that that's going to be a good use of your money. You're not going in blind.
Right. So we're up to number 3.
Yes.
What is the purpose and scope of this particular piece of nonfiction? We've got a perfect example for you.
We love this book, this series. There's 3 in this series. This is one, I know that I have it in my children's lit, we have it in the children's lit class. I don't know if I have it in my YA class or not.
I've actually moved this to YA, and the next one we're going to see I've put in my children's instead.
Now, I love the illustrations, and so it's Michael Emberley that does the illustrations, but it's Robie Harris that is the author of this series. This is It's Perfectly Normal. Now, this is also a book that is frequently on the challenged list.
Yes, it is.
Because it talks about masturbation, it talks about body stuff, and there are quite a few pictures of some nudies. There are some nudes, and it is anatomically correct. So, of course, I'm sorry if you are one of those that it's a little bit too prude to have that in there. You know what? You got to deal with it. These kids are having to discover themselves. Let's help them out so they know that waking up in the mornings, some of the stuff that happens is normal.
Perfectly normal.
It's perfectly normal.
That's why I love the title. And I'm just flipping to, I hope I'll be able to find the double page spread that I love so much.
The body?
Yes.
I love that one too.
One of the reasons that we both like these so much is it shows a variety of people.
Yeah.
So that when you look at, and of course, now that I want to find it, will I be able to? Of course not.
You keep going. You keep looking, because I think it's a good thing to show.
Because,
and this is before diversity and body type was even a big push. This was already included in these books.
Back when we were doing face-to-face classes, I would open to this double-page spread, and just to show people why this is a book on the banned book list. But I also would say, you know, if you can't find your body on these pages, here it is, then I'd be really surprised, because you've got all kinds of shapes and sizes and colors. You've got somebody in a wheelchair.
A baby.
Yeah, you've got...
an overweight man.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody.
Yeah.
Saggy boobs.
Absolutely.
I mean, hey.
What I love is it's got a great sense of humor.
Yeah,
There's a bird and a bee who are the 2 of the main characters that kind of talk about things. But this is a book my kids grew up with. It certainly helped me with the talks when we had to have them. But it is one that I include in my curriculum. So the scope and purpose of this was pretty broad when it first came out. Here's just a really good, broad, deals with lots of topics about sex and sexuality. Well,
and changing bodies.
And changing bodies.
This one's broad.
So this was the first one, and then 2 follow-ups came, and one of them is this one.
It's so amazing. And this specifically talks about eggs, sperm, birth, and babies and families. So it's sexual reproduction and all of that. So it's not the changing bodies, and it's not. This is meant for younger kids, then It's Perfectly Normal. Then there's a 3rd book that's a green cover that's for younger kids as well, that also talks about babies and sperm and stuff like that.
But
So.
real words, real situations, nothing is held back. And so the scope and purpose is, in the first book, broader.
Yep.
This is narrowed, and the third book is narrow as well.
Also, the purpose also is for the
Right.
younger age group too. That this one and the third one are for younger. That one is more for older.
Yeah, you've got picture books like Hair in Funny Places by Babette Cole, which I still love, which is about puberty, about, what the physical changes that happen, physical as well as other changes that happen during puberty. So look at the scope and purpose. What do you want? Do you want something broad? Do you want something narrow? What fits your particular needs?
This is also talking about scope and purpose. So what
Absolutely.
would you think that Teri, what's the purpose of this book?
These are gross animals who do gross things. Think of it as the gross book of animal records from Guinness. These are animals that make me say, ew. And having taught middle school for quite a few years, and then having kids at home who love these kinds of books, and I'm talking girls. It's not just a guy kind of thing. They love, the grosser the better. These were books that they would love to just turn to a page and go, ew, ew. So yeah, it's not pretty. I mean, you've got a leopard feasting on an antelope. That's
where they
not
put them up in the
exactly-
tree, and save them for later.
But on the cover, you've got a gorilla. I love it. With his fingers up its nose. So you can hear kids go, ew, what is he doing?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think he's doing?
So the purpose, that is the purpose, or the scope, it's focusing on animals that are doing gross things. So maybe if a butterfly were in this book, that would not fit the scope of this.
Unless it were a
particular
butterfly that emitted a real stinky odor.
Yeah.
And I do believe that there are
Well,
some.
they
I don't
may,
know. I
yeah.
haven't read everything on
Right.
butterflies yet.
So they're right. That could be a bad example. However, if it's not something that's gross, it doesn't
It's
fit
not going
the
to be in
scope
this
of
book. Yeah. So scope and purpose, again, that's something as an educator you have to decide. Do I need something with a broad scope, or do I need something more narrowed? Do I need both? And usually the answer to that is yes. So criteria number 4, if you're keeping track, is talk about the organization of the book and how it assists kids in finding answers to their questions. I love this one. It's called Why'd They Wear That? Fashions is a Mirror of History. Forward by Tim Gunn, so I already feel pretty good about the book because he certainly knows quite a bit about fashion. But if you look at the table of contents, this is organized, thank you, Karen, for getting it closer in, organized by centuries. So we look at fashion in the ancient world.
Chapter 1, that's a wrap. The ancient world.
I mean, you just have
yeah.
to love even how it's called.
Hats and heads off. Revolutionary times.
Yeah, revolutionary times. So it takes you from before Common Era, BCE, all the way up to the 20th century and beyond, where it starts to look at how the world at war changed our fashion. And I think it's always fascinating to look at the fact that fashion is influenced by lots of things going on in society. And this gives kids an opportunity to see that, what they might see on MTV, on a red carpet, something like that, actually comes from somewhere. Karen just turned to a page called Crinoline. And she's too young to remember crinolines, but I'm not.
I also started, the first page I was on was corsets. And that just about made me want to vomit. It's like, whew, Scarlett O'Hara.
Well,
I want to be. What did she want to be?
She wanted to
What
have.
was she, 8? What, she was little.
I forget how.
Whatever.
I remember at one time trying to figure out how small that waist was, and it was way too small.
Look at that. How did people survive in those times?
Well, and how do people survive with any of the fashion trends you see?
Hell,
I
wearing
mean, it is
Spanx
kind of
would be
funny.
a little bit too confining for me.
And
Okay, so yeah.
so you've got different organization. Now, the other thing that this book has is an index.
It's right.
Now, there it is.
There we go. Well, first of all, it had a table of contents,
Has a
which
table
is
of
important
contents,
and
yes.
deals with organization. That's very important because we want kids to be able to find what they're looking for without wasting time. So we want them to efficiently use their time. Turning to the table of contents, they should be able to get an idea if something they need is in there. Then the index allows them to narrow in and see specifically if their topic is in there. If it's not, don't waste their time on that resource. Move on. Now, this is if they're researching. If it's for pleasure, heck, of course, spend all the time you want.
But you've also got in there suggestions for further reading. You've got a timeline in addition. You've got lots of back matter.
Yes.
I love that Donalyn Miller will say, you know, back matter is like a whole different book.
Yeah.
Because it truly focuses you in on certain things that are really important. A lot of them have glossaries. This one does not, because it has an index.
But it does have illustration credits, so it gives credit to where all of these different visuals come from.
And that's really
notes,
important.
And there's also a bibliography.
Exactly.
So all of that is important, and that leads to also ties into qualifications of author too.
Absolutely.
Because it's showing their research, it's showing their work and where they pulled information, proving that they're not just making it up.
That's right. It also, I think, is a good example of the final criteria we're going to talk about in this broadcast, and that's what role do visuals play? Because if you look at every page, visuals do a couple of things. They elaborate on the text, and that's kind of important, I think. But also, they help break up that text
So
into
like there's
chunks.
the yellow down there are like two little asides, two little vignettes that fit into this chapter, but are outside of the main narrative. And so that just allows kids to not feel overwhelmed with the text. They can go through and read these little sections and feel like they are accomplishing and learning, even though they're able to just, you know, kind of take it in smaller chunks. So most of the pages have those little call-out boxes that give smaller pieces of information. Plus that there are real-life photographs. That's a huge part of the part that visuals play, because it's giving us actual, and then when it's talking about the old times, we have actual artifacts, photos of artifacts that are in like museums that prove. And then there are paintings that represent the historical times when you're going even further back than that.
It's just, I mean,
Those
on
are
one
important.
hand, it can be a wonderful browsing book with lots to look at. On the other hand, it can be an incredible piece of nonfiction for someone who wants to know more about fashion, about design.
And history.
And history.
Right.
This is part of a leveled reader series from Penguin. Level 4 is for fluent readers, so that means you don't have to have lots of help there. It even has guided reading levels here if you have to do it. And it's a series called The Smithsonian. So they go into the Smithsonian and they look at various artifacts. We were just talking about that. This is about the Star-Spangled Banner, and it talks not just about the song, but also about the banner itself, the flag. And what I love, you want to talk about visuals and stuff, we have lots of archival photographs here. So it talks about it was on display, but eventually the Smithsonian felt that lots of the stitching needed to be repaired. And so they went in and repaired, and it shows the process for repairing the stitching in the flag that they had on display, which was the flag over Fort McHenry during the writing of the Star-Spangled Banner. So what role do those visuals play? It depends on the scope and the scope and the purpose of the book. This one has a little bit narrower scope and purpose than why they wear that, but you can still see the importance of having illustration, having graphic organizers, charts, maps, all those kinds of things like that are still needed. There's a series of books from Scholastic, a series of nonfiction books on rocks and minerals and some other kinds of topics that when you purchase the book, there is a website to go to where you can download another book. Sometimes it's a notebook in which you can take notes on your reading. Sometimes it's a book that is intended for other readers or that takes a focus of one of the topics. We're just seeing incredible things happen in nonfiction. And in part that's because of Common Core. And I think that's good, because in the past we didn't necessarily see really great pieces of nonfiction, especially for older readers. I thought they were kind of left out. This is a new, it's not really a series of books, but it's 3 books from Houghton Mifflin that look at different kinds of pieces in terms of nonfiction. This one is on seeds, and it's an incredible book that looks not only at, of course, what we know, seeds and what do we know as seeds, what seeds do we eat, but the importance of why having seeds and why caring for our seeds and why there are things like seed libraries and seed museums is important, because if something were to happen to wipe out crops, what happens?
Yep.
We don't have the seeds from which
hurt.
to start. So
Preppers,
yeah.
preppers purchase seeds, you know, in their packs that keep them for a long period of time. So they keep it in those disaster kits because they know they're going to need to be able to grow food.
Everybody's favorite topic for a nonfiction book, chocolate. I can't eat it anymore, but I can certainly dream about it.
Sometimes some sugar-free chocolate.
That's true.
Pretty good.
It's pretty good, but it's not the same. And this is an incredibly rich, no pun intended,
Color
view
illustrations.
of the science behind chocolate, because it's not just that cocoa bean; it's the process by which cocoa beans are processed and then produced. And here's one on climate change. It's called "It's Getting Hot in Here." I love that. The past, present, and future of climate change. And so it too has some wonderful illustrations, photographs, call-out boxes. Look at all the things we can teach kids about the organization of nonfiction information. And you've got one final one here.
You know, think of a topic and you're going to be able to find a book on it. Now, it's important too, like in your nonfiction collection, that it's balanced. You need to have information for all of your kiddos, because, you know, you cannot be the kind of person that says, oh, I don't have any GLBT books in my library. I don't have any kids that need that.
I wouldn't have the Quran in my library. I wouldn't have the Talmud in my library. Right. We see that from time to time.
So you need to know that your kids are there. And even if they're not, they still need to be able to learn about it. So here's a series. It's the Teen's Guide to Exploring Life Without Religion, and it says, what if I'm an atheist? All right. You know what? Maybe the kid's not an atheist, but what if the parents are? Okay? They need to be able to learn about different people. Remember, fiction, the mirrors and windows and doors don't just apply to fiction. It applies to nonfiction as well. So this is from Simon & Schuster. So in our description underneath the video, I'll have a list of all the book titles that we've talked about, and probably a link to Goodreads so you can go look about the books if you want. But, you know, looking at, you know, I don't know about this author, so I would have to kind of look him up. But there is a table of contents in the book. There are notes on sources. So you can see that the author this one has the glossary.
Good.
So that's important. There is a very detailed, let's see, what are they calling it? Yeah, it's resources. It's link after link after link. Man, look at all that. What are they calling it? Look at those notes. These are just notes. And it's just link after link after link. That's all of that is talking about where they got the information for the things in this book.
One of the appendices directs you to URLs, so that you can find out more information that might not be in the book. You also have acknowledgments page. And when we talk about qualifications of the author, I want to look at acknowledgments. Who did that author turn to get more information? Is that somebody who's recognized in the field? And often that's where you find out what's really going on. The other thing that's in Nonfiction for Young Adults, From Delight to Wisdom, is a set of 10 questions to ask about nonfiction. I love Peck's questions for fiction, and I've used them for years. And I love that Abrahamson and Carter developed some nonfiction questions. And so we'll just kind of review a couple of them with you, which I absolutely love. Tell how this book would be different if it had been written 50 years earlier, or if it were written 50 years in the future. Think about those things where we're still learning things.
Yeah.
Some stuff
like computers.
Change, but computers. Oh my
Think
goodness,
about that. Right.
Yeah.
Describe your favorite illustrations. Which illustrations do you wish you had done yourself, and why?
Would this book make a good documentary? Is there enough in here to have a full-length kind of film about the topic, or is this something that's, again, much more narrow? We can talk about that.
Explain what you think the author did to research and write this book. So that's like, did they go and interview? Like in Susan Campbell Bartoletti's on the KKK, book on the KKK, she actually went to one of those compounds where they lived, had their meetings, had their rallies, and spent time with them, and had to get permission from them, because she had to be up front and tell them what she was doing. But she actually went there and Interacted.
And that leads to, I think, a great question here. What kind of teacher do you think this author would make? If you're reading a nonfiction book and it is kind of ho-hum and putting you to sleep, probably not the teacher you want. But I fall into books by Sheinkin and Bartoletti, Gail Jarrow just kind of came to mind, Cy Montgomery. Those folks, they just absolutely draw me in. I remember when I was reading The History of Chairs, called Be Seated, The History of Chairs. I went into it thinking, really? I'm going to read about chairs. I mean, or even the one on the history of silverware. You just think, why? Or the Irish potato famine. But you find yourself pulled in because of that great use of narrative nonfiction.
Right. If you had to interview the author of this book, what would you ask them?
Always a good one. And a final question that they pose asks you to look at the title and jacket of the book and ask, what does that tell you about the book? That's very similar to Peck's question, what does the title tell you about the book? Does it tell the truth? Well, that's really true here. Ask yourself, animals that make you go, ooh, that's probably a pretty descriptive title for the book. But sometimes you get titles for books that aren't quite as descriptive as they could be, and sometimes the illustrations don't help you. So I think these are great questions that we can ask kids as well. I encourage you to track down Nonfiction for Young Adults by Carter and Abrahamson and spend some time going through them. We could have done another 50 books easily in this, but we want to kind of keep it to the point as much as we can. And we'll be back really soon and with a new video, and I'm not sure what it's going to be.
We haven't decided.
We'll find out. We have a couple different ideas. If you have ideas, contact us. Please let us know what you want us to talk about. We're happy to meet your needs too.
Our email will be in the description.
Absolutely. Bye everybody.